Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another ResearchWorks episode.
It's so nice to have everyone back again. Marissa, nice to see you back on the mic.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited for today.
Oh, I know. When I saw this paper, I thought you'd be right into it. Thank you to everyone who's been giving us so much great feedback about our return to the season. Everyone's been loving all this new research that's hot off the press, and today is no exception.
No, today is no exception at all. We have our final AACPDM guest, another contender for the Gayle G Arnold Award at the upcoming conference in New Orleans, with not just one but two abstract up for this highest honour. Welcome, Dr. Noelle Moreau.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us.
Yes,
what a privilege.
I know, it's so wonderful. I have been a huge fan of your work, Noelle. It's really influenced so much of the work that I do as a physiotherapist. And, you know, I had the privilege of presenting with you a few years ago for a pre-conference symposium about muscle. And that was just one of my greatest honours, was to present that with you, and now to be able to speak with you about the work you're doing and seeing you up for the award for just, for two abstracts. Is pretty exciting. So we're looking forward to asking you a lot of questions about this paper. For everyone, this paper is actually titled Effects of Power Training Combined with Interval Treadmill Training on Walking Capacity versus Performance in Real-World Settings in Youth with Cerebral Palsy. Quite literally, all of our favourite words are in there.
I know. There's a lot to go through. We are very, very excited for today, Noelle. But first, let me tell our listeners a bit more about you. So Dr. Noelle Moreau is the Associate Dean of Research and Professor of Physical Therapy at Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. Dr. Moreau is best known for her work regarding the neuromuscular mechanisms underlying movement impairments in children with neurological conditions like cerebral palsy, with her research focusing on innovative interventions to enhance gait and function, including power training for ambulatory youth.
It's good, isn't it? It's really good.
As a physio, these are very, very exciting words, and I love just how you bring everything together of what we do. It's very, very exciting, and the research and where it's headed.
So powerful.
But no podcast would be ready without the icebreaker question, Noelle. So along the line of strength training and power training, what is your most awkward gym story? And if you want us to go first, that's okay if you need time to think.
Does anything come to mind?
Please,
Okay, we'll go.
Okay.
All right. Do you want to go first? Has something come to mind for you?
Mine is a bit of a different gym clinic. It was a gym clinic when I was doing my undergraduate, studying to be a physiotherapist, and we were learning about exercise testing in a gym. And I had to do the stair 2-minute square stair step test, and doing it in front of my whole cohort, and then monitoring my heart rate and my perceived exertion. And as I did it, I tripped over on the step in front of my whole classmates in the gym, and it was possibly my most humiliating moment. And now when I do the Stairmaster, which is not often, at the gym, I hold on.
That's a good story, but one that, that you do remember these things, don't you?
Well, look, the story featured in our end of, when we graduated our yearbook.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, was that memorable?
Yeah.
Gosh, well, whilst we give Noelle a bit more time to think about it, I'll share mine. Mine isn't about me. Mine is about my observations in a gym, which I feel like in a gym there's fantastic things to look at, especially when you're traveling. I find that gyms and hotels are the most hilarious places to be, because usually people go to those gyms for the first time. They're on holiday and they're like, this is my chance to get fit. And so I see the funniest things in there. One of which was really recently, when we were back at AACPDM in Heidelberg, the gym that was there was a man, a relatively elderly man, goes in there and decides to walk on the treadmill. And as he's walking, he's got his wife, I think, and a friend, and they were all taking photos and videos of him, and he was giving his thumbs up, and they were creating all these TikTok reels of him walking on the treadmill, and it was just so hilarious seeing all that happen. And then you see people get on the equipment and they do things that are completely the wrong way, facing the wrong way, and I just look at that and go, I'm glad everyone's giving it a go, but it is just it's awkward because you can see what's happening. But yeah, nothing to do with me, but funny.
There's always good observations, like you said, especially the first time. And often, look, that is me. That's me trying to look at the picture on the machine, work out what you need to pull or press. Or
yeah, that's right. Noelle, does anything come to mind for you?
Pseudo funny, I guess. I do recall a time when I was kind of an avid runner, and I was running on the treadmill at the gym, and I tripped and was determined that I was not going to fly off the back of the treadmill or fall. So I tripped, fell, never let go of the treadmill, and pulled my sheer strength, just pulled myself back up.
Oh my God. And did you press stop?
People actually stopped to say, wow. That was impressive, but it was really embarrassing.
Oh, wow. That is actually really impressive to do that. I would try to do the same thing too. Did you manage to stop it straight away, once you got up? Or did you just keep running?
Kept running. No.
Wow.
That's impressive too.
That is true talent. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is so good. Because treadmills are scary. When you decide to, every now and then, I remember in my younger days, I would try to, do the sprints, and you see people would stop and they'll put their feet either side of it. Oh my gosh, just thinking about coordinating that sometimes is so scary, isn't it? And I should use the clip, but I don't put the clip on, but I should, so it could stop it. But I just kind of don't. I don't know why.
Yeah. But it is a fear of falling off the end, especially as I get more fatigued. So sometimes, some days I do use the clip.
Noelle, that is very impressive.
And it was a good probably 25 years ago. So, definitely had youth on my side. And we definitely, as we talk more about my study, we train our therapists as far as part of their training to how to safely take children off the back of the treadmill if they are to let go or fall. So actually I've incorporated it to my training.
I think that's really important. And
we always try to find a segue, and you just did it right then. So thank you for helping us. Let's get into your paper.
Now, Noelle, what do we currently know about, so going back to the basics, what do we currently know about how children with cerebral palsy ambulate and how that differs?
It's a good foundational question.
Yeah. So typically developing children throughout the day go through a variety of different intensity levels, and they go through these bursts of activity. So they might have a high-speed burst, and then they'll rest, and then they burst again and they rest. And they alternate between, let's just say, low, medium, and high intensities. And they tend to spend more time in the medium, but they definitely do have some low and high bursts. And so there's a lot of variability in activity. Children with cerebral palsy have less frequent bursts throughout the day. And when they do burst, they tend to only stay in the low and medium range.
Right.
So their intensity is not quite as high, and it's less variable.
And for these children that are not getting to those high intensity levels of exercise, why is it important to address this?
Well, it's important because we know that children need these higher intensity levels to participate in everyday life. In fact, my collaborator, Christy Bjornson, has a paper that really nicely shows that the percentage of time that children with cerebral palsy spend in these moderate and high stride rates is directly correlated with their mobility-based participation in everyday life. So we feel like if we can give kids the tools they need to emulate at these moderate and high intensities, we can improve their participation.
Right. That's so fantastic. And do we know why? What are the main contributing factors to why our children don't have these high burst rates? Do we understand the mechanisms of that?
I'm sure it's multifactorial, like most things in this population. But my underlying hypothesis that I wanted to test was that this was related to their impaired power generation. So power meaning the product of force and velocity, versus strength, which is just your maximum, say, amount of force that you can produce. And so the ability to produce force quickly or powerfully is more strongly correlated with activities of daily living. And their inability to produce force, we think, impedes their ability to ramp up into these moderate and high stride rates.
Yeah. And you think about it functionally, right? When you're walking about, there are times where you do need to pick up your speed, when you need to, get across the road safely. I always think about those ones. You do need to have that functionality to be able to pick up, don't you? And that's often a thing about keeping up with your peers as well. So this is why this is such an interesting study. First of all, this is a single-blinded randomized controlled trial, which is so incredible that we're still seeing RCTs being run, which is so important in our area. Can you talk us through what your comparisons were, Noelle?
Yes. So first, the experimental group was PT. We call it PTQ, which is like the acronym for the title, the power training combined with interval treadmill training. And that consisted of power training, so bilateral and unilateral leg presses, dose for power. And we can talk a little bit more about that later if you'd like, of how that differs.
Yep.
And the treadmill training portion consisted of these high-speed intervals, so 30-second bursts of fast walking interspersed with slower walking. And our comparison group was, it was equally dosed, meaning they received an equivalent dosage, except for the key ingredients that separate the two. So they received strength training. So the bilateral and unilateral leg presses, same exercises, but dose for strength. And they received traditional treadmill training, which is walking at like a steady state speed throughout the session. And then you only really increase the speed between sessions, which is pretty traditional in the therapy world.
Yeah.
So it was 2 combinations. So 4 interventions total and 2 combinations.
That's pretty impressive. So what was your hypothesis, just so everyone's really clear about what that was for you as a team?
So the hypothesis was that the power training portion, or training for muscle power, would be the key ingredient that would promote an improvement in walking activity, both at the capacity level, so like clinic-based walking, how we measure it as physical therapists and researchers, but also at the performance level, which is what they actually do in everyday life. And by training for muscle power generation, both isolated and through the isolated leg press exercises, but also then using the task-specific training, practicing using power generation during the task of walking, and specifically during this short burst interval training, where we're like forcing them to ramp up to these higher intensity levels, which requires power generation. So sort of a task-specific practice of the power that they are learning.
That's so fabulous. Should we go into a little bit more about the difference between?
I have a lot of questions. So we obviously, you've spoken about the power training versus the strength training, the interval training on the treadmill versus traditional treadmill training. Can you describe, can we go through those elements, I guess, in a bit more detail? So interval training, what is, I guess, interval training, and what did it look like in your study?
Okay. So the interval portion consisted of 30 minutes of total walking, but within that 30 minutes, they underwent these 30-second bursts of alternating fast speeds to slow and controlled speeds. So 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, just constant alternating.
And how did you determine what the fast speed was for each child?
Right. So really the goal was to determine like just their initial fast speed. And once we determined that, everything was progressive, and including the power training and strength training, all portions. Just want to make that clear that even if I sometimes speak about where we started, everything progressed, regardless of group. So we used their overground fast gait speed as a metric. So we would calculate 80 to 100% of their overground fast walking. Typically, you walk slower on a treadmill than you do overground, just for comfort. And so we would use that as a guideline, and we would try them somewhere in that range until we found a speed that was appropriate. And for the self-selected, we use 80 to 100% to determine what their like slow speed would be, or not slow or comfortable speed.
Sure. That's great. I love that as a guide.
So it's 30 seconds kind of faster and slower for the full 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. That is great.
Great. And then when you go towards
the power.
Yeah. Go for it. The power.
I don't know if you wanted me to go into the power training exercises.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Yeah. We're very interested.
So for the power training portion, we did the bilateral leg presses as well as unilateral. And we used like an incline sled, and we used external weights for the load. So we did 1 rep max testing, actually in both groups. But for the power training, we started on average around 50% of their 1 rep max. For some participants, we had to start at 40. And the goal was to produce the concentric portion as fast as possible and eccentric slow and controlled. And we did 5 sets of 6 repetitions and for each of those. And so that was kind of, in a nutshell, the dosing for the power.
And what was the range that you get the kids to work through? In a range, out of it.
We started we started at 90 degrees of knee flexion and to their full knee extension. And then it was progressive. So once they could complete the sets and reps for a session with good form, control, and speed, then we would increase them by, usually around 10 to 20% for the next session of the load. And so we just kept bumping the 1 rep max, but keeping the velocity at a high speed.
That's amazing. And then so traditional strength training, how does that contrast then?
So for the traditional group, the same exercises, dose more for strength. And so we typically started the first session at 65% of 1 rep max, 3 sets of 10 to 12. And then the same as they were able to produce those sets and reps with adequate form and control, then we would increase them 10 to 20%.
Brilliant.
Do you think
the velocity was slow and controlled, concentric and eccentric.
Do you think this is a bit of a side question, but when the children between the groups, do you think the recovery was different after sessions between whether it was power or strength based? Just thinking of, the muscle soreness. Was there any difference?
We didn't notice any difference with that. It wasn't an outcome, but these kids are really, from even some prior work I've done, surprisingly kind of fatigue resistant. They only need about 60 seconds of rest between sets.
Wow.
And very few complaints of muscle soreness or fatigue.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Some fatigue, but overall, general fatigue.
No, I'm just thinking about kids doing this, this power and strength training combined with, the 30 minutes of treadmill training. It's a decent, really good workout. Yeah. You're definitely getting them to those high intensity levels.
And how many times a week again and over how many weeks? Sorry, Noelle?
Yeah, it was 3 times a week for 8 weeks. We gave them up to 10 weeks to complete the protocol.
Right. Yep.
And so it was a total of 24 sessions.
That is so good. Yeah, that's very doable. All right, well, let's go into the participants now before we go into the results. Do you mind just describing your participants? I know there were obviously children with cerebral palsy, but how many were included and what did that look like?
So in this, we had 38 subjects that completed the primary endpoint, meaning they completed the intervention as well as the post-assessment. And we had 20 that were randomized to PTQ'd and 18 to the STT group. We did an adaptive randomization approach to try to control for differences between the groups with smaller sample size and with the heterogeneity of CP. It can be a useful approach. So we used site, age, and GM-FCS level as these adaptive randomization covariates. And it did a nice job because we didn't see any significant differences between the groups in those characteristics. And so we enrolled GM-FCS levels 1, 2, and 3.
Fabulous.
And our age range was 10 to 18.
Wow. That's fabulous. And so your time points that you measured was obviously baseline, post-intervention, and you had some follow-up assessments as well?
Yes, we had a 2-month follow-up assessment to kind of assess that short-term retention and a 6-month follow-up for more of a long-term.
I love that, which I think is such an integral point of a study, right? It's not just the immediate, it's the carryover. But let's get into the results. I think we've been waiting very long to talk to you about the results. I guess what were, just broadly speaking now, we'll leave it to you. What are the main results?
So we didn't observe any differences between the groups for self-selected gait speed, which is a little surprising. However, we did see the fast gait speed differences between groups. And so we observed a difference in favor of PTQ'd at the 2-month post-assessment. And also it was maintained at that 6-month post, which was really nice.
That is so good.
Also, 1-minute walk test, which the instructions are to walk as fast as possible for 1 minute. So usually that's closely tied to fast gait speed. We observed similar findings. So within group, we saw increases, significant changes for PTQ, immediate post, 2 months and 6 months post.
Wow.
And the other exciting part about this is we really wanted to make that link between capacity and performance. So typically when you report the results of a study, you're reporting capacity-based outcomes.
Yeah.
And you really don't know if those changes are going to translate to actual walking out in everyday life. And so we really wanted to look at those. And when we looked at the performance outcomes, those were measured with a stopwatch accelerometer. They were the stopwatch for 7 days at each of the time points. And we looked at steps per day. We also looked at the intensity levels, this low, medium, and high.
Right.
And we combined moderate and high together. So that would be anything over 30, it's actually strides, 30 strides per day is it test one leg, and less than 30 is low. And when we look at the percentage of time, so in one day, if you took X number of steps, what's the percentage you spent in low versus moderate and high? And so that was one of our outcomes. And we found this very interesting that the children who were in the PTQ group, they significantly increased their steps in moderate high, that total percentage of moderate high as compared to the strength training group, who actually increased their low.
Wow.
So they it was sort of a specificity of training effect where the high velocity training definitely pushed them to the moderate and high, but the strength training also, with the slow and controlled speeds, they increased their low steps.
I love that.
That's such a great result.
And then looking at performance in that way, I feel like that allows them more chance to have carryover, because then they're obviously embedding it into their everyday life, that you're teaching that ability to generate power, what that can look like. And then naturally, like you said, they're, spending more time in those moderate to high intensity areas, which is fantastic. Yeah, especially for this population. You think of those 10 to 17-year-olds when they're typically developing peers are really starting to, some really get into gym and, physical activity for the many benefits it has. Yeah. I think to be able to give, children with cerebral palsy, gym FCS 1 to 3, this ability to increase, go from those lows is fantastic. And the way you looked at performance to carry that through is fantastic.
I remember a conversation we had years ago, Noelle, when we were talking about some of your strength training work as well. And we talked about how there's, across the ICF, there is this real pendulum shift of saying it's all about participation. We know participation is really important, but we do need to also remember some fundamentals when it comes to, strength training and how that can have such a big impact on how a child's able to perform on a day-to-day. And I feel like this study really does demonstrate that from the perspective of going, strength, the specificity of your training impacts outcomes that can allow you to be more involved in everyday situations. I guess from your perspective, Noelle, what would you really like people to think about from the results from your study and how it can influence what they do in day-to-day practice?
I think one thing is that if you're really trying to improve gait and you're trying to improve someone's ability to generate power or ambulate at these moderate and high steps and change their mobility-based participation, that you would probably want to consider a power training approach over a strength training approach. Perhaps if your goal was for total just muscle hypertrophy, strengthening an extremely weak muscle, improving their capacity to generate force, then strength training might be, more appropriate. So kind of thinking about your overall goal. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And I think thinking about that capacity and performance, they're both really important factors. Yeah.
In terms of your results,
I think, if I may.
Yeah,
of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing I'd like to say for physical therapists in particular is that the motor learning and motor control literature definitely stresses the importance of task-specific training. Repetitions matter, intensity matters, right, for improving a functional skill. However, I would urge therapists to also think about, does the child with cerebral palsy, do they also lack potentially some underlying muscular resources that they might need in order to be able to achieve those high intensity levels or to get those reps in. And so I think, that saying, we have a saying here, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, you may need to address a strength or a power deficit in addition to task-specific training. And that's what I really wanted to illustrate here was you don't have to pick one or the other. You can do both, right? And I think both are really important.
No, absolutely. I think we've spoken about it with Diane Damiana before as well. And she's like, you've got intensity of practice for a skill. Let's be really clear. We're talking about skill development here. Like with all of us, we want to learn new skills. We need to practice that skill. But we also, most of us would do some strength training or do some form of exercise because that helps with your overall well-being. That allows you to be able to do the things that you want to do. So it should be no different to the kids that we work with because they want to live their best life too. So they do need to be looked at in balance. But I love that you've said that, Noelle. It's really fantastic.
And I love the idea of combining, because we are so often thinking about obviously function and performance, and we do treadmill training as a common evidence-based technique to improve walking speed and capacity, but to combine it with that power training and, like I said, strength training, it makes sense just to look at the ICF and combine what we're looking at an impairment level, but how it does affect, because we're so focused on participation, which is fantastic. But like you said, what is it that's filtering down that is contributing to those things? And so I think the combination of the power strength training with the treadmill training
you're still doing the specificity.
Is fantastic.
Can I ask you now, Noelle, I want to make sure I don't forget to ask you about this. How did you train therapists to be able to support kids off the treadmill? I think that's a really integral point here if you want to do treadmill.
So Christy Bjornson and Christy's my collaborator in Seattle, and she was also a second site for this study. We had a protocol where we had the therapist hold the gait belt, one in the front, one hand in the front, one in the back, and walk. Basically, you step backwards with the child and you walk them off the back rather than trying to hold them or lift them up. You actually walk them off the back. It's actually a little bit safer, than trying to keep them on the treadmill as they're stumbling.
That's good. So they're actually wearing a gait belt. So there's something to hold on to. Fabulous. Okay.
That makes sense.
That's really good.
Yeah, great.
I'm glad we remembered to ask you that question.
Now, I guess there's always this question in terms of where to from here, because you and your team have done so much research in this area, and I know there's more to come. But what is upcoming next for you?
So I really am interested in implementation science. So how can we take this intervention, which actually was designed to be something that could be translated to the clinic. And by that, I mean, we chose equipment that is routinely found in most clinics and practices, leg press, treadmill, and the treadmills that we used weren't even very expensive as well. And so something that we thought we could immediately translate. Also the fact that it was a closed chain, more like functional closed chain, leg press activity versus my prior study, which was on a Biodex isokinetic dynamometer, which were very expensive. And so kind of that next step is how do we implement this into practice? And we would need to uncover, all of the issues, the barriers to implementation. And then also I'm looking at kind of the underlying mechanisms of how the training is working. Also even at a gene expression level. So is our training manipulating gene expression or even control of expression with microRNAs and how that's working and how we might be able to learn more from understanding those mechanisms so that we can refine our approach.
That sounds really good. Well, I'll just keep bothering you, Noelle. I'll send you emails as I see these papers get released because I think that's really interesting what could be contributing to that. Well, That was just a fabulous conversation, lapped everything up there. Before we finish, though, we're going to head to our most popular segment. I have no idea what he's going to ask, but, we should start putting out get bets here. Are we ready to head into Tell It to Ed? Ed, as you know, is our producer. He doesn't have a background in child health, but he's been listening to this conversation, taking notes, I can see, to ask you a question, Noelle. So before he has a chance for a question, I'll get you to summarise this work in about 60 seconds or so. And Ed, you'll have time for one question. Over to you, Noelle.
Okay, so children with cerebral palsy, we know their muscles are weak, and traditional practice has been to employ methods of strength training for these children to make their muscles stronger in an attempt to improve their function. And what we found over time was that just training muscles for strength was not yielding functional improvements or very little functional improvements. Power generation, which is the ability to produce force more quickly, is more impaired than strength. And we've also found that it's more closely related to functioning, especially mobility-based function. And so this study was designed to test a power training paradigm that paired true resistance training, power exercises with walking on a treadmill in a way that promoted intervals of walking fast and slow to sort of like force the participants to use that power generation during walking. And we compare that to the more traditional approaches, which was traditional strength training at slow and controlled speeds, with treadmill training at more of a steady state speed over a period of time. So think of it more like endurance. And so we compared those combinations. And what we found was that the power training or PT cubed group was able to improve their fast gait speed to a greater extent than the strength training group, and that it was maintained as long as 6 months post-training. And with that improvement in fast gait speed, we saw that the way that they were walking out in the community changed. And so they were able to take steps that were at more of a moderate and high intensity level throughout the day compared to baseline. And also those improvements were greater than what we saw in the strength training group that actually did the opposite. The other group actually increased their low intensity steps to a greater extent. And so that's kind of in general the nutshell of the results.
That is fabulous. I loved hearing all of that again. Great. Ed, are you ready for your question?
I'm not sure, but I'll ask something anyway. So I've loved this conversation. I like this whole, how can I put it, holistic approach with both strength and intensity, or balance in some way. So, I thought back to my younger days doing training and thinking about, the whole endurance and power, the reps versus intensity. And because I'm an IT guy, I kind of drift off into tech-related things. So my question is kind of tech-related, because I think you've done a great job kind of walking through this particular topic and paper. So my mind is kind of drifted off to things like exoskeletons that assist with power and strength. So relatively recently, I've seen things like that, the hypershell online. It's used by people who do hiking and walking, and rather than taking over the actual action, it assists with it. So it does power generation in some way, and that obviously allows people to have greater endurance or go hiking more. And I'm wondering if this study and that kind of technology kind of can combine in some sort of way that allows children young adults to have access to things like exoskeletons that aren't so heavy. Batteries, for full exoskeletons don't last very long, but this kind of assists rather than takes over. So I'm wondering if I'm on a potential $1 billion idea here.
No, well, over to you. I told you sometimes it's left field, but that was interesting.
No, I think that's a amazing observation. And yes, I think if exoskeletons can be like lighter, easier to wear, not as bulky, that there's definitely a lot of promise for that. And I think, using technology to help augment the power is great. The thing that we've run into with assistive technology over time is that sometimes when the person becomes dependent on the technology or dependent on the assistance. And so I think the important thing is that if you use it as an adjunct, that you also are mindful of the dependence that can develop and that you work that into your protocol.
Love that.
But I think it could be great to even allow an individual to do something like a hike or something of that nature that maybe they wouldn't be able to do on their own.
It's great. I mean, as technology comes along, right? But there's still the general principles of what it means for strengthening, but then, performance and out in the community. Great question, Ed. Lots of things to think about. Noelle, thank you so much for being on the pod today and teaching us and sharing this new research. It honestly was just so fabulous.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we loved it.
Thank you for what you and your team contribute to, I think, our profession and seeing what we do in the clinic every day is it will be translated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So to all of our listeners, please head over to researchworks.net if you want to have a bit of a rundown of what we spoke about today, but also head to researchworks.academy to access free tools of the evidence for you to support your practice and being more evidence-based. And there's lots of tools there that you can use as well. And this is all happening during the AACPDM in New Orleans. We've just brought to you some great research that's hot off the press. It will soon be in press, I think, is what the whole idea of this will be. So do keep an eye out for all of these papers to be released so you can follow along, take a look at the protocols and see what it is that you can do to implement this into your practice. But this has just been a stellar lineup. So once again, to all of our listeners, thank you for listening. Noelle, thank you again and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.